We're just gonna make this full screen
See, I wouldn't have known what to do here.
and,
Mazepin.
oh, so your video is what we see. Okay, and then we're gonna say share screen. And what screen do we want? This one, I think. Share. Okay.
And now I can
And
go.
so you have this, and you can make this full screen when you're ready to
Yeah,
play
yeah,
it.
yeah. And the one right next to Google Maps is how I'm going to start. So that's it. Yeah,
Okay,
great.
perfect.
Now,
Okay.
question is, how am I going to remember all of this?
Well, you're just going between these two tabs.
Yeah, but
No, I don't
Yeah,
think
that's
it's
it.
touch screen.
I on
Sorry.
purpose put them next to each
Okay,
other.
perfect.
And oh, they can see. Now, how do we do share screen again?
Well,
Oh, it's
you
already
are
done.
sharing screen, so you stop share if you wanted to. but
No,
you
I don't.
Need to.
No.
Okay?
So everybody, what people can see on the Zoom this,
Yes. Right now, there's only one person on Zoom.
and that's us.
But no,
Oh.
Sarah,
And I can see the shared screen.
you can hear us, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. he's
You're
also-
answering. That's amazing. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you perfectly, but I'm going to
Praise
mute
the Lord,
myself.
praise it, be she.
All right, if he moves, Sarah, if he moves away, he'll have the microphone, okay? Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
That's fine.
See, I have a very advanced case of, is it ADD?
Then we have to give you some medication.
Oh, no, I don't believe in
Settle
that.
you down.
No, here's the problem.
So we'll give you the back class. You can walk in the back.
Let me answer you this way. Many years ago, I remember I just came back from Iraq, which was the war in 2003. I'm in Washington. And let's just say that the powers that be, the American powers that be, made my life rather difficult in Iraq. Not the Muslims. The Muslims were fine. I got along with them fine. My problem was the Americans and the British, because I'm not, wait a minute. Okay, and they all knew I'm Jew and everything like that. And what happened was, I went to my doctor because I was also underwater saving, you saw the Iraqi books, things and everything. And we wanted to make sure that I'm okay. So I went to my doctor to get all sorts of blood tests and stuff like that. And I told him what was going on and the enormous pressure I was under. And he said, I'm going to give you something for this to calm you down. And I love this. This doctor understands me, like, it's unbelievable. I'm alive because of him. One of the many reasons. Anyway, this guy then runs out. They do an EKG, they do whatever. He comes back and he said, I'm not giving you anything. I said, okay. Why? I don't care one way or the other. I want to know what he says. And he says, because you like being you. And if you take medicine like that, you're not going to be you. And I just started to cry. You know why?
Because he understood you.
Yes, he understood me. And that is the greatest thing.
But I'm anti-medication to begin with. My father, when I was growing up, 2 years old, says, a glass of tea with lemon and honey will take care of it. Okay, come on, let's talk about
My father's family, my mother's family was much calmer. My father, but, you know,
On the move.
yeah, I was born with caffeine in me.
That's good. That's why you were able to accomplish what you did.
You're absolutely right.
Otherwise, you wouldn't be able.
Please, if I were, how do you call it?
A laid back.
If I were to go along with everything and not constantly question everybody and everything, I'd probably still be working for the government as a bureaucrat. Because I wouldn't have offended anybody. But the moment you have an idea in your head and you express it, you threaten people. And that was my problem.
Okay, let's talk about the subject.
The subject? What
Yes,
subject
we
is
want the
that?
subject.
Rabbi Green, and you got, who does not have a paper? Do you guys not?
We have.
No, but there are people behind you. One second. Give me a moment. Okay, because I know that at least two more people. Rabbi Green, whatever, you know, look, it's also part two is on the other side. We won't need this at the moment, but we will shortly, because you're going to see the foreign minister of the UAE, of the Emirates, give a 45-second explanation of why we in the West are destroying the world. And he's right. It's not, are we trying to destroy the world? Well, I'm not so sure about some of the people who are running the country right now, but I am sure that most people are not trying to do this intentionally. Oh, sorry, I missed your, here I say in. So I am too. Okay. What I propose to do is to, you see, there's a map on the screen here right now. I want to explain from a Gulfie. The Gulfies are the Bahrain, Saudis, the United Arab Emirates, not Qatar, which is working with Iran and a lot of American enemies, why we have a base there, and why we call them an ally like NATO is beyond me, because what they're doing to undermine the United States in the United States and in Europe and Israel. But we must understand. Well, I think we should understand them in order to come up with serious policies. And what I'm about to say, most of our government, especially today, they don't want to hear. And you'll see how you remember this administration, when it came to power, was very against the Abraham Accords. Still are. But the question is why? Now, again, as I said, what I propose to do is to explain how the other side saw it. I'll never understand Jews, but I do understand, I think, pretty well the other side. Okay. Oh my God, I have notes. 1 second, everybody, please. Here they are. Now, how does the other side understand it? And the other side, I want to know what motivated the UAE, that's the United Arab Emirates, that involves Dubai, which is the big, whatever center. Most of the oil is in Abu Dhabi. I think there's 7 or 8 different emirates, and they're tiny. Most of them are basically one tribe, and the senior leaders of the tribe run the place. And their responsibility is to take care of all the locals. Again, this is how they work, not how we work. That's UAE. Bahrain is a different story. Bahrain is 20% Sunni and 80% Shiite. That's the equivalent right now of how the Ukrainians and the Russians feel about each other, which today is, of course, not too positive. Now, the rulers are Sunni. The population, therefore, is overwhelmingly Shiite. Their problems. So who does Bahrain look to for support? It needs support from the outside. Where does it get it? Saudi. The Saudis. And Saudis are silent partners on many things here, as you will see. Why?
But Iran is Shiite.
Iran is Shiite and very deeply involved in undermining the Bahrainis. You can see on the map here, I'll try to use the pointer. The pointer, that's Bahrain right there. And the real problem we have is Qatar, right below, which funds the Muslim Brotherhood, which is the Muslim Brotherhood hates Israel with a passion. They're the ones, since they don't control Mecca, they're the ones who basically invented, from a modern political point of view, Jerusalem. Since they can't control that, they want to control Jerusalem. And that, of course, makes problems for people like, I assume, everybody in this room. Why did these guys, all of them, that is the Saudis, Bahrainis, the United Arab Emirates, and Oman, which is a little different, but it's the same idea. Why did they make an agreement with Israel?
Well, Oman's not part of the agreement.
No, it's not. But, you know, before the Sultan of Oman died, Netanyahu came and there was a formal visit, public everything with Oman. Omanis are not Shiites and not Sunnis. It's the tiny, tiny little group called Ibadi. It's a different whatever. And they're, okay, now what is the goal of all of these people along this coast here, from, let's say, Kuwait all the way down here? One word: survive. And if anybody is interested, Sharansky wrote a piece which is published this morning, in which he said Israel had to choose vis-a-vis what it's doing with Russia between its survival and its principles. And it's a real problem. You can understand. But if the point is, first you know, when you go into a hospital, let's say you've been in an accident, they do, you know, what's it called, triage, where they decide what is your worst injury that we go after first, then we go after the next thing, and you get up to the minor ones. That's what Israel is doing, what Sharansky wrote. I believe he's got it, and it's a painful thing, because do you want to compromise your principles? But if you're dead, it's, you know, who cares? And this is how international relations work. We Jews have got a problem, and we've always, because we've been a tiny minority, and especially in Europe, have had tons and tons of problems. We always figured, oh, if we act nice and we're sweet, they'll like us maybe. Oh, you dance in front of the police. What's the police? It's like the head guy in the area. Oh, make nice to him. Be nice to the rulers. The Hebrew word shtadlnu.
I don't agree with you, because after World War II, after the Germans, they said never again.
Yeah, but Jews are
And
saying
they
never
do
again and
never
making
again.
and not doing never again.
They should have heard the speech yesterday with office.
Okay, now understand the following. How these are tiny groups along the Gulf coast there. What looks like west, it's southwest coast. Again, I'm just going to move the this whatever here. What is how, they have survived, these little tribes in this area. How have they survived? They know, number one, they know how to play off everybody. In the end, they really don't trust. Why should they? Because all these powers came in, and then either they, for their own interest, they did whatever. And these people learned over, actually, we're learning now, there's, believe it or not, underground, under the sand there, for 6,000 years, there's history. These people managed to survive somehow. They looked, let's just say, until about, let's say the beginning. When did Obama start? Was it, excuse me, I'm sorry.
9 years.
When did he start? No, that was the second, 2008, 2009. The 800-pound gorilla in that area from about 1971 to 2008 was the United States. They liked the 800-pound because they knew that America was basically taken care of. That's the Saudis, that's the Bahrainis, that's the, in some way, the Kuwaitis and the Emirates. They all basically work together except Qatar. And then Obama comes in and, you know, he talks a nice game and eventually makes a deal with Iran. How do you think they thought? They felt abandoned. And what was interesting is I have a lot of friends who have been in the Emirates for all sorts of things over the years. I have not. I've been in Kuwait, but I've not been anywhere else in the Gulf. But I have a lot of friends all over the place who live there. And what have they done when they realized all of a sudden that the 800-pound gorilla is abandoning them? Is when they really began to start the relationship with a tiny little country called Israel. Israel's like the 250-pound gorilla. If you can't have the 800-pound gorilla, then you want the 250-pound gorilla. So as long as Israel is strong and, more important, resolute and won't appease, won't give in to its enemies, which of course includes the bad guys from the Emiratis hate the Palestinians with a passion because they tried to undermine that society. As long as you don't give in and you're resolute and you're strong and you're economically, you're going places, you're high tech, you're all these things, then Israel became the guy that you work with. Why? Because you need to survive. Remember, that's your bottom line, survival. I remember a friend of mine who 5-6 years ago was doing some work on security. And he is a young guy, but he's sitting with the ruler of one of the Emirates. I can't mention names because if I do, I'm violating a confidence, which I will not do. And this is a young guy, very smart. He carries a non-Israeli passport, it's not American, and Israeli passport. He barely knows Hebrew, so you can, but he certainly speaks English. And he's sitting with the ruler, and they're talking about security, and the ruler knows that, put it this way, does he know for sure that the guy lives in Israel? He sure knows, but he doesn't, it's never brought up. He's on his other passport to get in there, which is an English-speaking passport, country. And they're speaking. And my friend says to the ruler there, you know, listening to you talk in our discussions, and 5-6 years ago is, already into, it's before the Obama, it's during the time of Obama, excuse me. He said, if I didn't know better, I was talking with you, and I'm talking with Benjamin Netanyahu. The views are exactly the same. What's their serious problem? Who wants to destroy them? Iran, the Shiites. Why? Because you and I may think, oh, well, everybody is, we all are nice and we all whatever get along. And we're worrying about what are all these people going to do to Israel? That's not what they're worried about. The Muslims have an eternal battle. It's called Shiites versus Sunnis. When Muhammad, their prophet, died, the question was who's going to inherit the mantle of Islam? The Meccan, the aristocracy of Mecca, you can see it on the coast. Let me just pull. The pointer here is Mecca. Is it Mecca, the Meccan aristocracy, or the family of the prophet? The family of the prophet are the Shiites. The Hebrew word si'ah, which means faction. If there's a si in Hebrew, it's usually a shia in Arabic. So Shia is si'ah in Hebrew, same word. It's one language, Arabic and Hebrew. When you look for things, because you guys speak Polish, know that at times, like let's say with Ukrainian, there are words which have a slightly different, they pronounce this letter a little differently and all that, but it's the same, and you know. Slavic, yes, but here we're talking Semitic, which is Arabic, Hebrew, and whatever, and I've talked about this in whatever previous lecture, but let me simply go back to the Gulf because that's what's important. The Gulfies have realized that they can't trust America. And But, if we look to make peace, we look to have ceasefires. They look to win. How do you win? Who's stronger? The Shiites, I think I've mentioned whatever in the previous talk, whatever. The Shiites are maybe 12% of the whole Muslim world. That's only 300 million people. It sounds like, if you give the number, it sounds like a huge amount. But Muslims are maybe 1.6, 1.5. But we don't know exactly a billion people in the world. So the rest of the world is Sunni. No, we don't give a damn who inherited the world, who should inherit the rulership of Islam, the family or the Meccan aristocracy. But they do, and they have no concept or way to make peace among themselves. So we're, of course, looking at how they're going to make peace with the Jews. These are the Abraham Accords. It's not called a peace agreement, but that's all right. And do they love it? They enjoy Israel. They have a great time in Israel. But Islam can't have a peace agreement between the Muslims and the non-Muslims. They can have a truce, a temporary truce. Now, if you are a country like Israel, and Netanyahu understood this perfectly, I'm not sure about the characters there now, but it means, therefore, how do you make sure you survive? Strength. You don't give in. You don't say to all sorts of things. You don't have to be mean. You don't have to, look, you got to know that if I go after you, if I do that, I got to know that you, Rav Moshe, are going to really destroy me. And then I'm not going to, I don't need to submit to you, but I won't make trouble for you because I'm afraid of you. Now, the great Richard Kemp, if anybody happened to have seen Mark Levine last night on TV, he interviewed Richard Kemp, Colonel Richard Kemp, who ran British forces in Afghanistan. He ran British forces in the Northern Ireland War. He is what he's done for the Jewish people in the state of Israel is unbelievable, and he is in no way, in any way, of Jewish origin, and we know this from DNA. And he's a remarkable human being. He said last night on the program, Kemp, K-E-M for Mary, P for Paul. He said last night a very important phrase. He was talking about Ukraine, but he threw in Iran and all these other things. Appeasement provokes. When I act like this to you and all that, and I want to give in, you will push me harder. Of course. No, you're saying, of course. We're talking you didn't grow up here in the United States. That's the point. But strength deters. What does strength deters mean? If I know you're going to do God knows what if I step out of line. And that's why the Gulfies love, if you wish, love Israel. It's not because they love Jews, and that's not that. They've done unbelievable things with Israel and been doing it a long time. Remember the Abraham Accords. I should remember when this was. It was during COVID, because I was at the ceremony of the weddings, and I can't. Everything mushes in my brain. I don't know time-wise anymore. Was it about 2020? Yeah, no, but I think you may be right that the signing was there. Now, what happened there? These guys, and they gave a brilliant speeches. Now, as you will see, what they think they're up against Iran, and they're up against something else. And that is their words, and you will hear it shortly because you will hear a 45-second video of the, let's call him foreign minister of the UAE, of the Emirates. They never talk about fundamentalist Islam. They talk about radical and extremist Islam. Now, you say, oh, that's all these words mean. No, hold it. If you're a fundamentalist and whatever, you're back in the original principles of Judaism, and I'm sort of less so, or I have a different view what the fundamentals are. If I call you a fundamentalist, the word I'm in essence saying is you are going back to the beginning, and what I'm doing is wrong. So I won't call you that. I'll call you a radical. I'll call you an extremist. These are very important words. And as you'll hear in a moment anyway, okay, let me go back to, and I'm very good, as you can see, being distracted. About 5-6 years ago, I have done a lot of work on Israel-China things. And there's nothing to do with technology because, I know how to use some technology, but I don't know much about it or how it's done. Anyway, there's this organization called Signal in Israel. Signal is the Sino-Israel Global Network of Academic Leadership. It's now founded by a woman who hated being Jewish. She grew up in a crazy background. She did a BA in Chinese at Yale and then disappeared to be God knows what. Anyway, for various reasons, the hated thing that she came to her sister's wedding, which she didn't want to in Israel. And as the plane took 3 days back then to go from where she was in China all the way to Israel. The moment she saw the coast, she started to cry and she said, I'm home. I'm sure you know of other people who might have thought that. It's like, after all, since then, she's observing, it's a long story, she's a grandmother.
Who cares?
Who cares? Here's what happens. All of a sudden, when her kids are older, she says, maybe I can do something for Israel. And she sets up this Chinese Israel organization. And she and I met at a conference. And that's why I went back, because I had no background in China, I had no real interest. But again, it's Islamic stuff that I do. So I went with her on this. And I've been many trips with her to China. So what happens? It's on the net what she does. All of a sudden, about 5-6 years ago, she gets a phone call from a friend, a guy who became a friend of mine, and she had no idea. I didn't know who used to be a senior official in the government of the UAE. No relationship with Israel, right? And he says, I hear you're taking an Israeli delegation to China. I'd like to come along. She doesn't know who this guy is. She knows nothing. This is long before the Abraham Accords. And so she checks him out, and in Israel, they said, you can work with him. And she says, look, I'll pay my way for the whole trip, everything. Nobody does anything there without the permission of the rulers. And that's key to millions of things going on throughout the Middle East. And he himself was an official. When you talk to him, I'm a nothing. He was a lot more than a nothing. Anyway, he joins the thing as a member of this Israeli delegation 5-6 years ago. He goes to China, and he's a Gulfi. I mean, he lives in Dubai. What's all this about? Now, in the Middle East, I can't say something directly because I can offend you, but I do things behind the scenes. Has everybody heard of Al Jazeera? Okay, Al Jazeera, the Arabic word Jazeera means a peninsula or an island. And the whole of the Arabian Peninsula is called, in Arabic, Jazirat al-Arab, the island or peninsula of the Arabs. Who is this tiny little pipsqueak, Qatar, to have a TV network called Al Jazeera? And who do they go against? Mostly against the Saudis. They hate the Saudis. They are fanatic you say your type of fanaticism is one and mine's another. And if you know, in my neighborhood where I grew up in Philadelphia, you don't go to the church that I go to, then you're doing the work of the devil. Now, since you have you are one type of fundamentalist, one extremist. I'm another type. What happens in the Middle East when people disagree? What do they do to each other? They kill each other. We try to talk it out because we have a different culture. They don't. Now, Qatar, who's working with Iran, a Shiite country, Saudi Arabia has Mecca, which is the holy center of Islam.
Qatar is Shiite or
Qatar is totally Sunni, but works with Iran. It sounds complicated, but once you get involved in the details, it all will make sense. My hatred of you, and we're both Sunnis, let's say, matters more to me than you. I'll lie with you. You're a Shiite, the lady in the back, for whoever's listening on Zoom. And so the two of us, you and I, who hate each other, will lie against you for whatever reason. That's the way these things work. This is what the Gulfies are petrified of, and they know how to handle it. Now, I said it's all subtle. I asked everybody here. You all heard of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, right? Where is that located?
Jerusalem?
Are you sure?
Well,
Actually, it's supposed to be Mecca. I send them all to Mecca.
No, please. Here's the thing. Now, the point is you're not sure. Because who are we to decide? We're Jews. Now, Saudi Arabia, we know where it was. It's about 27 kilometers, let's say 19 miles from Mecca. It's the Al-Aqsa in Arabic means the furthest mosque, furthest from Mecca. But the Saudis, because they're always afraid of what the Palestinians and the Muslim Brotherhood, because they have a different type of fundamentalism, the Saudis shut up, never talked about it. But all during this period now of the thaw, let's say, like the last 5-6 years, long before the Abraham Accords were signed, you've got Saudis now talking about the real Al-Aqsa is 27 kilometers, 19 miles or so from Mecca. What are they saying to the Palestinians then by saying that? I would say they would be raising the middle finger. You get exactly but they're not saying it by words. And as you see, because they began to see they could rely on the 250-pound gorilla, which ain't going nowhere, which says that if Israel starts, shall we say, quote, compromising and showing weakness, they're going to worry because they hate the Palestinians. And why do you think the Saudis, the Saudis are indicating things by letting people in Saudi Arabia, not only say that, but it's gotten worse for the Palestinians in Saudi Arabia. How do we know? Because the same guys who were talking about Al-Aqsa before are now saying the Palestinians aren't real Muslims. Why? They're from here and they're from there. There are a bunch of tribes who ended up there. They're from Bosnia, and that's true in the 19th century. Bosnia is in Yugoslavia, or was, but Bosnia-Herzegovina. It's one of the 5 republics, whatever that is, of former Yugoslavia. But what is the answer? You're not real Arabs. What are they doing? They're giving the Palestinians the same finger. They don't say it in so many words. That's how they do it. We don't want to see these subtleties. We don't want to understand these things.
what happened with that trip to China with the gentleman who went?
What happened to that?
What was that outcome that he took that trip to China?
I only learned about him afterwards. I wasn't on that particular trip. But you want to know what this guy does now? He's got 3 museums in Dubai. One of them is the Museum of Tolerance, has a big mezuzah on the door. it is he who did so much of he was sent out like I do, like I was. Why do we get along? We're friends. We don't know each other all that well. We've seen each other a bunch of times in Washington. But why do we get along so well? Is that he's the scout who sent out to see how things really work. He was sent out on that mission to China. Now, does he love us? Forget love. It's interest. And we Jews, because we're so always afraid throughout history, we want people to love us. The hell with the love. You know, love is in your family. Love is people that you're friends for many, many years. It's not that, but we Jews worry about that. We have to understand, and that is why Sharansky said, look, we don't like what we did. We had to choose between survival and our principles. And that's a horrible thing when you have to. But what comes first, as we said before, it's survival.
I'm really not clear on this.
I'm not clear about a lot of
No,
things.
I don't understand. I understand if they're warring factions between the
Yes.
Sunnis and the Shiites. But why would you have the Shiites in Saudi Arabia fighting the Shiites in Iran? They don't want them to control.
Wait a minute, the government of Saudi Arabia is 100%, let's call it from our point of view, extreme Sunni.
Well, they're Sunni.
But here's the key and the principle, and you have to talk with Hashem to understand this, because I certainly don't. He'll give you a better answer. The whole coastline, wherever there is oil, there are Shiites. Who runs where the oil is in Saudi Arabia? It's the Sunni government, which hates the Shiites, but the oil is in the hands of, the area where the Shiites live is where the oil is. Now, who do you think is trying to undermine the Saudi government in the oil area there? Iran. See, that you're thinking like they do. That's what's important to understand how they think. Now, who would be the Saudis, the Bahrainis, the Emirates, and a few others? Who is the natural ally against Iran? Who are they? Saudis, Israel, absolutely. And the Saudis are saying, yeah, they're Jews, but they don't threaten me. My existence, if anything, they'll help me. Do the Saudis do things that we would not do? You know that already. Yeah. But it is what it is. Now, remember, everything is indication. In 2019, in December, I flew from New Delhi to Israel on Air India. How did we fly and why did we choose? Judy was not with me. I say that just her allergies, whatever, she couldn't be in India. What happened? Judy's my wife, and Sonia and Bolak are our absolutely wonderful neighbors. Here, that's, anyway, excuse me for saying that, okay. It's also the truth. Anyway, we flew. Why did I insist? I was with a friend. It's the guy we own our apartment with in Jews. Anyway, we flew from New Delhi. Why did I insist on flying Air India and not El Al?
Go straight across.
Because Air India was allowed by then to fly right across Saudi Arabia. India is where there's the name Sarah Lazarus. We assume that. Let me see if I can get the pointer here. You can see where the pointer is here, and it flies. The easiest way to get to Israel is to go directly across like that. No. And on at that time had to go around. That is about adding maybe, I think, another 3-4 hours. Anyway, now, why did the Saudis allow that? Remember, they never said we love Israel. And they in the past would not let anybody go to Israel over Saudi territory. Now, oh, wait a minute. This is beforehand. It was only Air India. When the Abraham Accords, which the Saudis are not formally a party to, all of a sudden, the flights are now direct across whatever like this, and it saves a lot of time. It's about 3 hours and 6 minutes from the airport in Israel to Dubai. There's a lot of traffic on it. The amount of the common interests, it's just huge. As long as Israel is strong, it has to be the 250-pound gorilla. And that's the way it works. Once that,
But I think it's more than that. They need the army, they need the Israeli brain, they need everything. because they have
Yes.
The money, the oil.
yes, they need the money, they need the Israeli brains, money they don't need.
No, because they have the oil.
And the joint technology things, look at it from Israel's point of view and look at theirs. This is not like the agreements between Jordan and Egypt and Israel. This is real.
Business.
Everything goes. And the relationships are by and large very warm. Now, I say this because it may sound a little odd. The people in the Emirates have been saying to me, Harold, why are the Israelis so suspicious? Because a lot of the businessmen, how come, we want instant whatever. What are they afraid of? My response is, you've never been a Jew. You don't understand that our history is filled with suspicion, fear, including in the United States of America. Meaning that if you don't live all the time among Jews, you will see that Jews are always very nice and this to the Goyim. You know a story, you may know a joke, but believe me, this happened to a friend of mine. They're on a flight in the United States. He is, and he looks the part. He happens to be, he's a chassid. He's sitting next to a woman who he suspected might have thought that she was Jewish. He sort of looks the part, or does he? They're in business class, so they're not touching. There isn't a problem here. And at one point, they strike up a conversation, and the woman says, "Why do you wear those clothes? We live in the modern world." And going on and on and on, because she was embarrassed. Who the hell is she to make a comment like that? And it made her feel uncomfortable. And the guy looks at her and says, "What are you talking about? What do you mean?" And she's going on and he said, "I'm not Jewish. I'm Amish." Watch what she does. Oh, it becomes apocryphal. But this happened to a friend of mine. And he was the chassid in the story. And what happens? The moment she hears that he's not a Jew,
It's called.
"Oh, I have such respect for your culture that you're keeping your traditions," and all that. And the conversation goes on. And then the meals arrive. He gets a kosher meal. And she looks, and now she's, "What's going on here?" He said, "Well, actually, I am Jewish. I'm a chassid." Maybe she didn't know it. And boy, the moment that, that she wasn't personally threatened by this man and what he looked like and all that, everything was, then, "Oh, I respect and admire." No, they don't respect and admire ourselves and our own tradition, but they respect other people's tradition. Anyway, simply back to the people who are doing business in the UAE, the Emirates, in Bahrain. Guess what? They walk around with kippot on if they want. Not only that, I have a friend, and frankly, it's the son of the guy who was sitting on the plane before, who, again, chassid, his son-in-law is a Moab. And right before the Abraham Accords are signed, he's going from Israel to do a Brit Milah, a bris, in the UAE. And they said, Harold, is it safe? I said, there's no guarantees in life, but if I were in the situation, I would do it. He now is on the, he's on a plane all the time, back and forth doing brises. Of course for Jews. No, but this is a good point. You know what? The Muslims also have a Brit Milah, which is done not only.
13 years old. They do?
Yes,
Yeah.
they do.
When they're
And
13
here,
years
watch
old.
this from a previous lecture. Remember, Arabic and Hebrew are basically the same language.
Yeah.
What is the root? Chet, taf, nun. Chatan, chatuna. This lady over here has got it exactly right. Chatan to us is a groom. Chatuna is a wedding. Chosna, whatever the Yiddish comes from the Hebrew. It's from Tzipora, from Moshe's wife. And she basically circumcised the two kids.
Right.
Now, in Old Hebrew, in Old Semitic, which Arabic and Hebrew are from, it doesn't mean wedding. It means rite of passage. And one could argue that going from being unmarried to married is a huge rite of passage, right? Why am I bringing this up? The Arabic word, rite of passage, the Brit Milah is called chatne, the same root. So what it meant in olden times, for us it meant Brit Milah, for them it meant circumcision. Excuse me, for us it meant marriage, it became the mean marriage, for them it means whatever. Now, we are really basically a lot in a similar,
Your cousins. Okay.
something like that. Please, 1 second. I want to just show quickly a 45-second video. And the 45-second video, if you, the English, I want you to read the paper in front of you. I want to tell you what is going on, because it's important you know the context and why it is so important. Here you have the foreign minister, and I didn't even know who he was when I saw this at first. It's a conference in Arabic on the net, and he goes to English right away. And everything is in English here. Some white lady with a British accent is asking at this conference in English about a question about Islam. We don't hear what the question is. And then he said, I'm going to answer in English. I didn't know he speaks English better than I do. He didn't grow up the way I did. He was educated differently. But beautiful. He said, he goes, let's just look at what he says. And it's under you see the thing in, well, is it blue? It should be. Under there's a URL. It's about the fourth line. It starts with European woman. Asks a question. And you don't hear it, as I said. And Abdullah, who, again, I had to look him up on the net to figure out who he was. I didn't know. He said, and he is the foreign minister. He's the one who signed for the Abraham Accords at the White House. And he gave a speech afterwards. I'm going to tell you, he did not, his English, as you'll hear, is perfect. He gave a speech in Arabic. The crowd there, very few people knew Arabic. Why do you think he gave the speech in Arabic?
Say who I am. That's my pride, my heritage. That's what I
And
am.
one other thing, and it's extremely important, and that is he knew that they would twist his words in the Arab world, those who opposed what he was doing. And he wanted to say exactly what he wanted to say. There'll be no mistake. They can play with it, translate it differently. There won't be a translation. There was instant translation at the White House. He spoke Arabic because his audience, remember the subtleties. That is the problem at all times. Why they do what they do. The guy's brilliant. He says, let's go down. The European woman asked the question. And he said, Abdullah says, I will speak in English. It's about the 5th or 6th line on the page, so you can understand what I'm saying. The European woman says, I have translation. And she did. Abdullah, he said, no, I know you have translation, but I want to make sure that you get it right. In other words, he's using the language that he wants to, and please understand, this is their mentality. It's extremely important. There will come a day when we will see far more radical extremists and terrorists coming out of Europe because of lack of decision-making, trying to be politically correct, or assuming that they know, the Europeans, the Americans by extension, they know the Middle East and they know Islam, and that they know the others far better than we do. Imagine they know someone saying, I know Judaism better than anybody in this room who's not Jewish. It's not possible. Anyway, what does he go on to say here? There will come a day, whatever with these, that the far more extremists and terrorists coming out of Europe for lack of decision-making, trying to be politically correct, and assuming they know more about Islam than the others far better than we do. And that is pure ignorance. He calls, and please understand, you will not hear the word fundamentalist from what I said earlier. This man is a remarkable human being, and he knows that Iran is an enemy. He knows that the radical extremist Muslims that he's talking about here are the enemy. Well, he's his natural ally there, as long as it's got guts. Israel. That's the key. That's their mentality. I'm tiny. You know, I got a lot of guts, but I'm tiny. Who has guts? Who I can rely on? Who all these things? And that is why they signed the agreement. Now, watch this, guys. This is the foreign minister. He has a bigger title, whatever. Are we ready? It's English. Everything's English.
And let me say this in English so you can understand what I'm saying. No, I know you have translation, but I just want to make sure you get it right. There will come a day that we will see far more radical extremists and terrorists coming out of Europe because of lack of decision-making, trying to be politically correct, or assuming that they know the Middle East and they know Islam and they know the others far better than we do. And I'm sorry, but that's pure ignorance.
That's it. And what's the point here? It says we're screen sharing. I still
You
hope.
might have seen videos like this
Must see
before.
people. I'm
But here's
sorry.
the big secret. Anyone can make one of these videos in a few minutes. You might think you need a professional.
I don't know what I'm
animator
doing here,
or
guys. I'm
some
sorry.
fancy editing program.
Oh, skip
That's not
ads.
the case. In fact, we know
זוג מאוד מאוד נחמד, שאנחנו נתקלים בו במקרה.
Let me just get out of
ג'ו
there. We
ואשתו
go. Okay,
הם
one
עבדו את
second,
הרכוש שלהם
חבר'ה,
בארצות
one
הברית, ויצאו
second.
למסע והגיעו למקומות מדהימים, כולל איראן, וגם אלינו, ועשו מזה סרטון יוטיוב, וזה נהיה מאוד פופולרי. בואו נראה קטע ואז נדבר איתם.
Okay, we got this back, I hope now. Anyway, there is therefore a natural alliance, and it requires something of Israel. That whoever is in the government here in the United States, that when they pressure Israel, and they are doing that galore on the Iran issue. Why the American government is obsessed with the Iran agreement is beyond me. And they're giving in,
Crazy.
well, maybe they're crazy, but that doesn't give, that doesn't explain why everybody, there must be a sane person among them. Most of them have resigned, sane people. What happens? Iran is their problem. Now, if Israel gives in to the United States, how do you think the Gulfies are going to react? The Gulfies, that's Bahrain, all these other places.
They also hate Iran.
Yeah, but if Israel gives in and follows the American line, they're absolutely afraid of Iran, and the Americans are enabling Iran to get a bomb. Who's natural allies here? Now, maybe you heard, and now I'm going to stop you. There's an Arabic phrase that maybe some of you have heard. I against my brother and I against my cousin. The three of us, my brother, my cousin, and I against the world. But that's when that phrase is used. There's a corollary to that. You and I are brothers, and you're my cousin. Sometimes it's going to be I and my cousin against my brother. And that is why that you think that all Muslims are supposed to be brothers. That's why at times you have Sunnis going against Shiites, Sunnis aligned with the Jews, Israel, which are not their natural brothers, because all Muslims are supposed to be brothers. It's like we Jews understand that idea in Islam. Everybody, all Jews are responsible for each other, family. That came into Islam from Judaism. Sometimes these alliances get mixed up. Hamas, which is supposedly in Gaza and not in other places, but believe me, it is helped by the Turks because, and what is interesting, they are Muslim. They are, let's say, radical, but it's called Muslim Brothers. Who are they? Who supports them? Qatar with tons of money. And Israel has facilitated this. Do not ask me to explain why. I can't. I don't have any explanation. It is.
Because they're crazy.
The Israelis are crazy. In this case.
Some of them, yes.
Yeah. Well, it's not only the leftists sometimes. People are appeasing. And what happens in the Middle East when you appease? People aren't sure who you are. Hamas, and who else is supporting Hamas? Iran. And Iran is Sunni or Shiite? Shiite. If Iran is Shiite, Hamas is totally fanatic Sunni. But what's their common enemy? Israel. Hezbollah is a Shiite in Lebanon organization. It's working with Hamas. So just because of the simple explanation, all Muslims together against the Jews, my brother, my cousin, and I against the world, sometimes I matter, my survival matters. I can tell you that the previous government, Israel, and I am not a personal friend of, and I don't know Netanyahu, but he understood the game. He knows how to play chess. The guys who are running Israel right now, they play checkers. It's not the same. Anyway, I hope I've confused you enough.
Yes.
Thank you, Sonia. But all I'm saying is you can understand the Middle East, but you have to use their way of thinking. And I might have said in one of my previous talks, I had given a lecture on a talk on a kibbutz where I had spent a lot of my summers as a late teenager, a secular kibbutz.
Which one?
So it's across from Bet Shemesh.
Which one?
So it's the name. It's across from, and it's leftist. And all I did was I quoted the Arab documents of how they understood Israel, what the goals, what they want to do, and all this. And someone had already done the translation to Hebrew, and so I just quoted, I read what the Hebrew. And a woman comes up to me afterwards, and this is our real problem in the end. She said to me, "You convinced me, but I will not change my views." Why? Because if I change my views, even though you convinced me, I have to change my whole, Stefan, my whole worldview of the conflict, meaning that it's not solvable. It is temporarily solvable as long as Israel is strong. And I'm not going to do that. I'm not prepared to change my views. So with a big smile, I sort of bowed and said, "Thank you. I'm only asking you for everything I'm talking about, the same thing." And those people who have been born in other countries have no problems with what I'm saying. No, I don't mean Canada or England or some other Western European country. But you intuitively get what this is about. You intuitively get what Israel's up against and what the United States is up against. And then you have to try to understand, we're using the Russians as an intermediary with the Iranians in Vienna for these negotiations. Well, we don't want to upset Putin because it'll hurt the negotiations and on the nuclear. Believe me, when you see what comes out, and I only have inklings, I have no one. It's a pure and unmitigated disaster. It makes the original agreement look solid. And the Soviet negotiator, Russian negotiator, see, I get an age every time I say Soviet. The Russian negotiator, intermediary, yesterday said that he had, Iran fought for every comma, every period, absolutely everything, and they took care of their interests beautifully. And by inference, America, I only will give you the answer in the Middle East terms. America bent over, and you understand what I mean. Okay, Rhode.
Because the president doesn't know what he's doing. He would know
It's either
better
willful ignorance
if he
or
would
something
know
else, and I
more,
cannot,
then it
that's,
would be
I don't
much
know.
better.
So are you saying that the main reason the agreement, the Abraham Accord was for security, the really
Yes,
is the small Israel, even though it's very advanced and all that.
250-pound gorilla. If a 250-pound gorilla walked into this room, how would you feel? You'd be afraid. You'd be more of the 800-pound, but the 800 pounds disappeared.
So they think that Israel come to their defense if, well, that Iran is gonna attack them. Is that what they're saying?
And
Don't count on
they can't count on America. Israel, point, if they come across the Iranians and try to take over,
So they rely on Israel to come and defend them. Is that
I
what
don't
you're saying?
know if you need
Well,
Israeli.
I'm trying to understand their reason, but they come.
There are other things you can do besides send soldiers.
Diplomacy.
Diplomacy,
Well, then what are you
can
talking
send a
about?
rocket, you can send
cyber warfare, which Israel is one of the best in the world, and it's very
Okay, so I'm
good that no
saying,
one
so
talks
from
about it too much.
security point of view. So that's what
Security
they're
point of view, yes. And I think, today with laptops and things like that, you can sit on a beach, with a bathing suit on and send missiles all over, and they'll go, you want to go into this window of the house and not that? It's unbelievable what Israel
So
can
the
do.
reason is security. And
I'm saying that is the
assessment-
basis. Number one, they can trust Israel because Israel's interests and their interests are
Okay, so that's
exactly
okay.
the
That's what the
same
main
now
reason is.
vis-a-vis Iran.
because if they attack them, it's continuous to Israel directly. They have to be careful.
I don't know about directly, I don't know this, it doesn't matter. That's for them to make their judgments and that's it. We have a common enemy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's also, just like, remember, Venezuela, North Korea, China, and Cuba, these are all enemies of the United States. They all work together beautifully. You know that, of course, our government sent an emissary down to Venezuela.
Oil.
Yeah, but listen, oil is not oil. The cleanest oil that we know of in the world, where do you think it's, it's American, this Russian oil and all that. You're worrying about the carbon footprint, whatever that is, I'm confused. But the carbon footprint of Russian oil is much worse. And a barrel of oil, if you're concerned about the planet, why don't you want the cleanest oil available? And why anybody who drives here knows what's happening, even down here to the price of oil, it's unbelievable, of gas rather. It's awful, unbelievable.
Yeah. I remember hearing about Islam, that they divide the world into Arab, Islam,
Dar Islam, the world of Islam,
Dar
and the world
Islam,
of
Dar
war.
Islam. So will the Emirates, the Saudi, not the Saudis, the Bahranis accept Israel permanently, or that's a temporary truce?
Nothing is permanent. at this
It's,
point.
put it this way, you never heard of long-term loan or permanent loan? Something's on permanent loan at a museum. Who does it belong to in the end? But the point is, the equivalent, the closest you can get to peace is it's a long-term whatever. What does that require of Israel? The two things, or maybe it's more than two, that Israel is so good at. The Jews, remember 100 years ago, Jews in defense, are you serious? We're very good at what we need to do, and sometimes not so good at the things that we, like bureaucracy in Israel. It's disgusting, as you guys know, and we know. And what happened, it took Israel a whole bunch of time. Who invented capitalism in the world? Us, we Jews. But once we got into all the silly socialism and stuff like that, and maybe we needed it back to establish the political entity in our ancient homeland. I don't know. Israelis were crying when Stalin died.
Oh, really?
Yes, I have a poster somewhere in our myriad of things that we have in storage.
When I worked
Anyway.
in Russia, they were
No, but what I'm saying is, we relearned capitalism. We're doing very well now with all the high-tech stuff. And who are in the forefront, even in this country? Maybe people whose ancestors were Jews. I'm trying to be polite here.
But don't you know that the world knows that the Jews have all the money in the world? This is why trouble.
Isn't it true
It is.
that Jews have all the money in the world?
It's true.
Oh,
We cannot
I don't know.
compare to the world.
anyway, so
Yeah, so as you have pointed out, the upcoming nuclear accords, the new ones look like they're going to be just incredibly bad. And it seems to me that eventually Israel's going to have to go after Iran. Will these other Arab countries that are part of the Abraham Accords allow Israel to operate from their territory, and will they participate with Israel in taking out the threat from Iran?
I'm not a military guy, but I can only tell you, we think we're older people.
Yes.
And we think that it's all planes and all this, or bases and all that. There are other ways of doing things which are much more sophisticated than little Harold that I can understand. But
But I think yes, because it's their interest to be safe.
that's the point. It's in their interest. And I can only say, as in the last few days, whatever the Israelis are talking, saying to the Americans behind the scenes, if you notice, for example, there was a huge explosion in Damascus last night. They incinerated God knows what. They are flying all over Lebanon. That's reconnaissance. And it's Israelis. And then things all of a sudden disappear. Yeah, it could be, and I am not exaggerating, someone sitting on a beach. I can only, to quote Ron Burman, the former ambassador,
Baruch Hashem that we have the Bishop.
and we have this amazing ability to survive. Thank God, because, well, there's something else, and we're all sitting here in a shul. And I would argue the following. By rights, we Jews should not exist. We are a tiny people. No, but wait, no. He was not a friend of ours. I'm talking about a different friend. Watch this. We're tiny people. What are we, 14 million if we're lucky?
Hashem promised us forever.
He has somehow,
He has a
he doesn't promise that each and every one of us will survive, but he does promise that our people will survive. Look at who our enemies have been throughout history. Where are they and where are we? And they're much bigger than we are. So, in other words, don't mess with the Jews.
Baruch Hashem, Am Yisrael Chai.
Yes.
That's it. Okay.
It's, please, logic. My mentor, who for various reasons was not a believer, and he's very Jewish. The Holocaust. And he had a cheshbon, he had an account to settle with Hashem because of, I asked him, very rational. I said to him, tell me, would you agree that the rhythms of Jewish history are different from every other history of anybody else in the world? And the answer is yes. Now, why we can come up with any whatever, but that we are still here and what we have contributed to civilization is unbelievable.
Because we are Am Yisrael. That's it.
Whatever that phrase means, we're the chosen people. What are we? Who knows? We can come up with a million explanations. All we know is we got a special relationship with something happens different. And let me tell you even about the Holocaust. And really, it's not fair. I think that if someone else need the, I'm gonna watch this. It's a story that happened to friends of mine in Israel. A family from Poland, 11 children to survive. One of the oldest was, and a sister and a very young sister. They come to Israel, they have families, they marry Ashkenazim like themselves. They have kids. One daughter of the younger sister marries an Iraqi, dark, black eyes, everything that you would think. They have a kid, a daughter. The daughter has green hair, green eyes, and a very strange color and texture of hair. People are wondering, did something else? It's called a non-paternity event. What happened here? And now the older sister, who is much older, like of the two, whatever, comes and sees the baby and starts to shriek and cry. And they're all looking at her, why are you shrieking and crying with a nice little baby who's in good shape? And the older one, they're like, the older one says to the younger one, do you remember Tanta, let's say Chaya, I'm just choosing, I don't know. Do you remember Tanta Chaya? And she said, I remember the name. Tanta Chaya was killed in the Holocaust. And what was the answer? She had, the only one of the family, this green eyes and this same, and of course, there is no non-paternity event here. Hashem doesn't forget who and what we are. Somehow it comes through in the DNA. And sitting across from, when Borek and Sonia were in Israel, I don't think you will mind in the slightest of what I'm about to say. I'm sitting across in their apartment in Jerusalem with Borek's first cousin that because of DNA and all sorts of things, Borek knows who he is. It's an unbelievable, and Borek is in his 80s. And I'm sitting across from the two of them. And I'm looking. You can see the face, you can see a bit in gestures. They're the same, no background. Bullock just met this lady. They have no personal history. They didn't grow up together. Something, DNA, something amazing. Hashem doesn't forget anything. Why did all of a sudden that come out with the green eyes and the this? Is it Hashem doesn't, maybe individuals aren't here or were killed, but their DNA. You never know. And that's our special relationship with upstairs. Whatever it is, we're here, Baruch Hashem. Whatever. Okay, guys. I hope you're not.
Yes, you go.
Next week? Next week, oh, next week will be the last one that I think I'm going to do, but I also thought that last week. And what I'm going to do is talk about Iran and the Jews, because we're a few days before Purim. I'm going to show, I went and had, and I was there, I slept with them, if you'll excuse me, one night back in the 70s. I went to the, and I'm going to show pictures, and I'm going to talk about the Iranian relationship with the Jews.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome so much.
Harold, Eritrea.
Yes.
They voted with the Russians.
Yes.
How come?
Interesting.
They weren't in the Soviet orbit.
There are a lot of odd things here going on in this whole area. You guys have a car? I'm going home. Okay. No, I have a car. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Stu Wagner.
I believe it. I'm not. I'm
Okay,
Harold Brooks.
well, I'm sticking with my story. You can stick with yours.
Okay.
Okay, I just wanted to, first of all, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I believe you contacted me many years ago in reference to genealogy. You were looking for someone from the Reuben family.
My mother's mother was a Reuben.
Right, so you had contacted me because I had Reuben on my genealogy.
Let me
It
ask
was uploaded to Jewish Gen and the whole thing, but I'm not able to make a.
No, do you know where your Reuben family was from?
Yes.
Where?
It's from an area that used to be in Poland, now in Belarus.
Oh.
Yeah, it's either Dalhina.
We're one. I have,
Okay.
you live here?
Yeah.
I have,
a hard time.
yeah, well, whatever. Dolhinov is where we're from.
I was just.
I also have the DNA of all this. I have a lot of the graves. A friend of mine, whose name is Barry Rubin, well, he's dead now.
He was the one who went to
Yes.
Dalhina
Yes.
and made that listing on.
Yeah, I've got all, I'll give you all of this if you.
Okay, so what happened is because of his post,
Yes,
okay, my wife and I went to.
you went to Dolhinov.
We went there because like the 147th name on his list of 150 names was my surname, was Einbacher. Okay, and so he noted on he couldn't read the first name and he wrote it. The gravestone had fallen, but I had to figure it's either my great grandfather after whom I'm named, or his wife. Okay, so
What's your first name?
Stu.
No, but in Hebrew.
Shlomo Chaim. Okay, so as it turned out, the OU was having like a march for the living for adults, something my wife and I always wanted to do. So we went to Poland. I did genealogy after the thing was over. We stayed. I did genealogy on my mom, Shalom, and then we flew to Belarus to do genealogy on my father's side.
I have the, on my computer,
Yeah.
the census of the Jews of Dolhinov from 1816, 1834, and it's all, you can all use it.
Oh, wow.
It's unbelievable. And you can
Okay.
have everything.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I'm, my
Thank
response.
you, because I'm a little bit I'm at a dead end.
No, you're not.
This, when I went to Dalhina,
Yes.
it was a couple days after Tisha B'Av, so it was like early August. Now, the cemetery in Dalhina is supposed to be being taken care of. There's a group of survivors and children of survivors who are paying for the upkeep of that cemetery. We got there, and holy Toledo, the vegetation was knee-high to chest high.
Does the name Leon Rubin mean anything from Israel?
Yeah, he's the guy who's in charge of the.
Yeah.
the
Leon's a
organization.
good man. And he also,
I wrote him from my hotel in Minsk. I sent him a picture of what was going on in the cemetery.
yeah,
And from that, so he wrote me back that they're gonna make other arrangements, for the upkeep of the cemetery. Not that it helped me because, I was there then.